So it is time for the last talk of the day. For those who are still unfamiliar, my name is Marissa True, and I'm joined today with Brian David Marshall, the president and publisher of InterPop, and Rachel Gluckstern, the group editor of InterPop. So welcome to the both of you, and thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks.
My pleasure. So before we actually get started onto InterPop, which is obviously a big part of the Tezos ecosystem, I want to learn a bit more about each of you, because both of you have very illustrious careers in the comic book space, and I think we should dig into what that experience has been before we dig into the blockchain stuff. So Brian, why don't we start with you?
We only have 45 minutes. So,
The SparkNotes version will do us just fine.
I've been working in comics since I was in high school, actually. I sold my first script as a writer to a company called Gluckstern. Started writing comics, editing comics, and got the bug really quick. And wanted to work with creators and bring new people into the comic space, and started my own company, which then became a company called Eternity Comics, which then became Malibu Publishing, which eventually sold to Marvel Comics. I was long gone by then, but it was a good ride. Got back into comics, intended to get back into comics, and ended up actually getting into the trading card game space around Magic the Gathering. And that was a great detour for a number of years that all leads me back into comics and to InterPop. Through my trading card game experience, I started designing games, built a couple of trading card games, started working with Zvi Moshowitz, a very famous Magic the Gathering player, to build the Emergence TCG, which is what we're doing at InterPop. And as we unfolded that universe into the game, we realized, that we wanted to make comics with it, and that we really wanted to make NFT comics. We wanted to give people that same collectible aspect that they got from real-world comic books, and bring it into the digital space, as opposed to the digital experience people have now, which is basically push some money in a hole and you get to read a comic, right? We wanted to actually give people something that they could own and that they could have some autonomy over, and then as we played around in the space, learned and started to give them more and more bells and whistles with that, which we'll talk about later. Rachel?
Yeah, Rachel, what about you? What was your history?
Well, as most people are in comics, I was a diehard fan first. And once you're a fan, it's like a vampire. You really can't escape. So unlike Brian, who's been on both sides of the desk as both writer and editor, I've always been in editorial. My goal when I was in college was to end up at DC Comics and edit Batman. And I did those things. So I was at DC for over 10 years and rose up through the editorial ranks there. The flagship title that DC is named after is called Detective Comics. So really the company is like Detective Comics. And that's where Batman debuted. And I got to edit that. And if I'm not the first woman to do so, then I'm like one of very few women. So goals achieved. What next? I went into traditional book publishing for the longer form version of comics, graphic novels, and then COVID happened, and we were all, in different kind of workplaces, and workplaces going away. And Brian said, "Hey, I need an editor for a digital line of comics," and I'm like, "Hey, I've not done digital comics yet." And what's neat about these is that we can collect them, sell them to someone else or trade them with other people, and there is a tangibility that digital has not always had, and that's a really big thing for me because I like tangibility, basically. So I got all my years of working on intellectual property with DC and expanding that universe and pour it into all of Brian's ideas and develop his foundation out into this whole line.
So how did the two of you actually connect in the beginning?
I think our paths have just crossed over the years, and I just had a tremendous amount of respect for the work Rachel had produced over that time, and she was really the right person to take the IP that we had and help put the right polish on it that we wanted. And I just had a lot of confidence And I knew that she would also be able to handle, she had enough of a track record to be handled this sort of extra wrinkle that we add into the editorial process, which is that we allow our fans to vote on every comic. So a comic comes out, you buy the NFT, it gives you the ability to vote on the content from that comic. So you choose which character gets to come back. You choose which cover is going to be, which of these 3 sketches is going to get advanced to the finished art. We're giving away a comic this weekend here at South by Southwest, The Abyss #0, and there's 3 different villains that appear in 3 different short stories with our hero. And if you redeem that NFT and own it, you can vote on which of those villains is going to show up in the first issue of The Abyss's regular ongoing story. And that sounds cool, but it is an editorial nightmare.
Yes.
And I knew Rachel just had the chops and the experience to be able to manage that, which really required someone with her level of experience.
So looking into how InterPop is essentially taking the principle of digital comics and then leveling it up by going into blockchain-based comics. What was each of your first interactions with blockchain on any level, not necessarily on the comic book level, but the moment that piqued your interest and made you think, I could apply my knowledge to this space?
So for me, I had worked for a number of years in gaming and had made a couple of different digital trading card games and was preparing to get back into that. And started talking to Zvi Moshowitz, who is our senior game designer now at InterPop, and he said, I think we should be making all of our, he's like, I want to make a game too, and I want to make a game where all the pieces are NFTs. And I'm like, what are those? And so this was really my first experience. He actually introduced me to Kathleen Brightman through that. We started talking, and that led to us undertaking the Emergence DCG. And as we just sort of went back and forth with me being kind of like just this paper curmudgeon in comics and games and all these other products, as we talked about it, it really unlocked for me this idea that, what Rachel just talked about, that idea that there's something missing from that digital experience, and which has been missing for me, and that I could actually have some agency over the things I own, and they're not going to go away at the rise or fall of a company. We just saw a major digital comic platform undergo some upheaval, and people just didn't have the same access to their collections. Their experience changed, and they had no say or no control over it. We want people to actually own their collectibles, and that's always been important to me. I love collecting, so that was my first experience, and that's what clicked for me. At I think an age in life where most people are pretty resistant to change, but it really just made total sense.
And Rachel, what about you?
To be honest, I'm a very recent convert, so this is my first blockchain.
So the engagement
experience.
through InterPop was what gave you the initial exposure to this world. And have you fallen down this rabbit hole? Are you fully convinced?
I'm out here fully preaching why we're different. And like Brian was saying, the major competitor in the digital platform space has really lost a lot of goodwill with its readership, in that they can't own their collections anymore, it seems like. People outside the U.S. will have trouble accessing what they previously bought. The reader is no longer functional in the way that they are used to. The fact that we have thought about all that and answered all that in our business model, tremendously exciting. We can satisfy customers in a whole new way.
I also think that there's a misconception that somehow NFTs need to be these, incredibly expensive objects, and they don't. One of the real, there's a number of reasons that we were attracted to building on the Tezos platform, right, building in the Tezos ecosystem, and a big part of that is the transaction fees that allow us to put out digital comics that you get to own, that you get this agency over, that you get to vote on the outcomes of, but really cost the same as other digital competitors in the non-owning portion of the landscape, you know.
So one thing we touched on earlier in the conversation is how the involvement of blockchain has created some degree of an editorial nightmare. And so, Rachel, what I wanted to ask you was, how much has this pivot into this kind of technology affected the editorial process? And how has your job changed from what you used to do, or your day-to-day, to what you're doing now?
I mean, when you're planning a story, you know, you really need to plan out far in advance where it's going to go, because people need time to draw it. So that just working out that schedule detail already is a nightmare normally, and then you're giving people control over what somebody is going to draw next. So we've worked out various ways to make it wonderful for the fans who are engaging in this, and schedule it far enough that we are actually still delivering on time, which is another big thing with me, because I'm an editor, I live by schedules. But it hasn't changed my process too much. It just requires more planning, and that's fine. That's great, being able to hear what they want, because thanks to, you know, their engagement, that's why we know the Abyss was the right character to launch with our, you know, with our Abyss Zero NFT here at South by, because the fans have responded so well to him. They keep voting for him to reappear. That now he's going to get his own series.
So
that's
amazing. It's a much more collaborative process in that sense, because you've got your editorial judgment coupled with sort of the will of the people in that regard.
You can read sale charts all day, and still not going to tell you what specifically in the story people liked about it. This issue sold well. Why? We don't know. Batman was on the cover. That's great. But what specifically drew you? And the voting really helps us pinpoint what they respond to.
And I have to just say kudos to Rachel. There's certainly, going into this process, I was like, yeah, you know, this will be a little difficult, and we probably won't hit all our deadlines, and, you know, well, and there's some room, just don't tell her, but she hasn't missed one yet. So it's been pretty amazing that despite this really unprecedented level of engagement with fans, you know, working with, affecting the storyline, affecting what cover art, affecting character design, that we've hit the mark every week. It's really amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
In both comics and tech, I feel that's that's kind of a big achievement.
Yeah, really.
So looking at InterPop and the notion of a digital fandom, integral to that is this idea of community and the power of community. So what makes it such an integral part of not just, you know, the digital comic universe, but the comic universe overall? And how is that carried from traditional comics through to what you're doing now?
Well, again, you know, to go back to the Abyss, right? This is something where we didn't know when we, you know, go back 6 months. We had no idea what our next title that we'd be adding to the line would be, right? We have a book called Emergence Presents. There's 3 characters that appear as the, you know, headliners in 3 short stories in each issue, and we have no idea which of those might emerge, no pun intended, as the next Emergence headliner. And so, you know, getting that kind of like back and forth with fans as they sort of, you know, interact with the creators and interact with other fans talking about the stuff, it's pretty amazing. And you know, this experience here, being, you know, having like the whole InterPop team here and being at a live event feels really good after 2 years of, you know, we're still meeting our coworkers for the first time. You know, we've hired people over these 2 years. Getting to go to shows, getting to bring our creators to those shows, and creating these exclusive opportunities for NFT token holders to interact with those creators is something we're really excited about in 2022 and beyond.
So one thing that I think we need to identify is this InterPop community. Who are they? Like, if we've started to interact and meet with them, what have we learned about them so far?
I mean,
they love the Abyss.
Yes. They also love a character called Bookworm, who has a cloak, and the Abyss has a cloak. So what we can decide on this evidence alone, cloaks are in.
Cloaks are back in.
Yeah,
Okay, I think we need to start fashioning those. Have them as a giveaway.
I think it goes well with what we've been going through the last couple of years, you know.
So then, looking beyond the comics and more into the trading card game space,
Sure.
how is that unfolding? Because in principle, we all know, like certain cards yield certain value, and then now that they're minted as NFTs, then those also carry value, and they have that idea of ownership. But how are people interacting? Are they playing already? What's the stage of development we're at?
Sure. So we're in a closed alpha right now on the Emergence TCG, trading card game. And we are, it's either 3 weeks or 4 weeks away, depending on how one sprint goes in the development cycle, from going into our closed beta, which is going to be a much, much wider funnel of players coming in. I mean, we had a really, really narrow funnel for the alpha. We're going to widen that, on an order of magnitude for this closed beta. People can get on the waiting list for the closed beta if they're here at South by Southwest by scanning a QR code at the booth, or just, giving me their business card or something, I'll put them on. And one of the things I'm really excited about is, as we get to that stage, the idea that every comic that we've produced, we have some really limited edition comics, we have some wider edition comics, that each of those comics is going to unlock a card within the game. Mm-hmm. So, and sometimes, really, like, so we have a cover by Butcher Billy, a pretty famous pop culture artist, and we did nine copies.
Yes.
Of that cover. And so people who have that Zeroth card in the game, only 9 people will have this really exclusive art from that comic in the game. And that to me is really exciting and really fun. And like, how did you get that? Well, I read the comics. I bought the comic. Oh, I knew before you did. It's like all that kind of like cool signaling that you get to do.
So has this fandom community evolved as they've gone from the offline to the online world? Because I mean, traditionally everyone has the stereotype of, a group of friends who are kind of huddled in a basement, poring over comics and trading these games and like even venturing into the role-playing aspect of it. So how have these communities evolved since?
There's definitely some crossover, between the really deeply entrenched blockchain fans and then the fans of the industries that we're building into. So we have crossover from comics fans and crossover from NFT users. And I think that builds the communities in a new way, whereas, before maybe everybody was just off in their own ecosystem, and now they can start branching out and reaching across the aisle in a weird way.
So they're integrating a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Discord's obviously a huge piece of that, and we have an InterPop Discord, and we have people in different channels, talking about games, talking about different games, comics, etc.
So as we're watching digital comics and digital trading card games evolve in this blockchain space, which is very much still a new thing, and I think as we were discussing earlier, we're very much at the beginning of this journey, and it sounds like you've both put a lot of thought into what the first set of deliverables, to put a technical term on it, are. But what's exciting you about where you can actually take it? Like, do you have visions for what you want to see in the future with this?
I mean, world domination. I think that's always a good plan. Whoops. Maybe not say out loud. I mean, since I do come from a traditional background, I still think a lot in terms of expanding the comics line, expanding what other type of comics we can do and what other formats. So it's a lot for me to think about where else we can take it in a tech sense, and I'm wrapping my brain around that, and I hope to have a better answer next time we have this talk.
I'm really excited about what we can offer to people who own these NFT comics, whether that is experiences, whether that's access to creators, getting them more involved in the story development and the world building in a way that is more organic even than we're going to give you 3 or 4 choices to vote from. I think creating more almost like of a counsel around that really active fan base, the most vocal portions of it, really giving them more of a seat at the table in terms of developing the way that world goes. But again, for me, I think the thing that I'm really excited about is this interoperability of the comics across multiple platforms, right? So that you have this comic, that it unlocks this specific item, using that unique piece of art that you can use as a profile picture, that you can use as an avatar within our other games or other products, that it just continues to release, very insider kind of like director's cut versions of the comics that are going to go to the people who've supported the comics.
So essentially, we're looking at making it a much more immersive, experience than it ever was before by actually blurring those lines between all.
Absolutely.
Enjoying them each and of their own right.
Yeah.
So then to talk of, because we've spoken a lot about the fans who are following this and now have an integral say in the development of these storylines, but what about the creators themselves? So the people who are doing the illustrations and the people who are crafting these stories, what's their take on all of this? Are they also facing this learning curve, or are they kind of ready to embrace it, or what's the mentality?
So there's a learning curve in terms of format. It is not, we do a landscape format, which is not a traditional comics format. So just learning how to adjust for that has been a bit of a curve. I think there are two things that really excite them. One, since it is still sort of a brand new universe, they all have a chance to really put their creative stamp on it, which you don't always get to do at DC or Marvel because you have so much back history loaded onto characters and parameters in which they have to operate. If Batman uses a gun, there better be a huge reason why he's using a gun, because normally Batman doesn't do that. Yeah. With us, we have more flexibility, and they are taking input from us and from the fans and being able to build upon that. With The Abyss, for example, the writer, John Rosen, probably has, at this point, 3 years of story worked out in his head because he is connected so hard with the character in a way that he was never allowed to with previous characters. That's amazing. Just for me as an editor, that's amazing to be able to have them be that inspired.
And as someone who, John is someone who's really goes back in traditional comics quite a long way.
He's had a long career.
And he's really leaned into this idea of letting people, really, he's really excited about this idea that I don't know where this is going to go.
Yeah, so that was actually a big overarching question, is that there's empowerment on two sides, but how they come to find a natural balance, I'm sure, is a degree of challenge, because if, you've got a storyline planned out over the course of 3 years, and suddenly you're granting editorial voting rights to a community of, your fan base, as it were, where do you draw the line between how much influence they actually have over the process?
We work with the writer to see, where he wants to go, they want to go. And we say, so we are going to introduce these, divergences. We need to figure out how that will work out, depending on which way they vote. So it's a lot of over-planning for things that don't necessarily come to pass, but they at least have the ability to think about it in advance. Okay. That worked? Great, thank you. And then they just have to do a lot of over-planning. And some writers don't like to do that, but I work with the writers that do like to do that. But the other big benefit that they get is in terms of how they are compensated. And this is something that is hugely important for me. Most of DC and Marvel was built on work for hire. And there's only so much compensation you get from that. Sometimes you get royalties from that. They don't own any of the characters, and they're pouring all their creative love and talent and passion into things they will never own or benefit from long term. With the NFT smart contracts, and this is the thing that really got me on board, we can do perpetual payouts, not even from, the first point of purchase, but in all the secondary market, that's amazing. That's something that they've never gotten to experience, and freelancers are practical people. They have to think about the money.
Yep.
And I think this is something that really has attracted them.
Well, imagine something where something like Siegel and Schuster, who created Superman, and a copy of Action Comics, however many years later, goes for millions of dollars. And there would be a royalty on that secondary sale that would go, and neither of them are with us anymore, but would go to their families, right? Would live on even after they did, which is just such an exciting opportunity for not just on our side, but I think for fans who are participating in that secondary market to be able to know that their fandom is continuing to support those creators, years down the line.
Yeah, and I think that it offers another dimension of value to their purchase. And exactly, so we're touching upon the empowerment of the creator, new ways for them to actually monetize their work, and also just gain more recognition for what they're putting out into the world rather than it being sat under a massive corporate umbrella.
Yeah, and now one of the things is we've started InterPop and InterPop Comics with this line of superheroes, this universe. But as we go through 2022, we're going to be expanding. We're going to be doing some licensed comics. We're going to be doing some work with other publishers, bringing their content into, getting them to choose blockchain as their path to digital comics, but then also working with creators to fully creator-owned comics, where people can leverage our platform to publish their stuff, put their work out into the world, and then really enjoy all of these rewards of being on the blockchain and having that, continue, again, the same thing, you think about like Robert Kirkman, in The Walking Dead #1, a first edition of that comic sells for so much money now. The creative team would, again, be able to participate in those secondary market sales, and they could continually engage with their fans in these really unique ways. So we're really excited also about expanding the line and giving creators even more opportunities to explore this space and to really, innovate in it.
So you're almost also lowering the barrier to entry for creators to feel inspired to actually participate and put their work out into the world and potentially interact with groups like InterPop to...
Yeah.
Hopefully just groups like InterPop. All of them here.
And I liked Rachel, what you were saying earlier about this idea of forward planning the different stories and kind of seeing which different pathways it could go down. And it kind of reminds me of Bandersnatch in that every outcome could be different depending on the will of the people.
Yep.
And in that, you actually unlock a lot more creative possibility. And so there's always the question of, would you ever just release every single storyline that could have potentially manifested based on the vote?
If our artists get another year to draw all of them, absolutely. But, I think that's something people would also wait and find out, what my vote could have looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talked a little earlier about the stress of not having control over every outcome.
Yeah.
This Wednesday, the 9 #6 comes out, and a character is going to die. One of the main characters. So I sort of laid the groundwork
Spoilers.
for this.
I was just about to say, wow.
I laid the groundwork for this universe and have really populated it with these characters, and it is agonizing to me that I don't have control over which one of them it's going to be.
I mean, so how do you grapple that as a creator to have something that is your own have to be given to someone else?
Have you ever seen an ostrich bury its head in the sand? That's kind of what I've done on this. I'm just like, I can't even. It really is agonizing to me.
I do want to say, though, after 10 years at DC, it's actually been incredibly amazing to have Brian be so generous with his creations and let us develop them and do crazy stuff and even kill one off. DC, it's a wonderful place to work at for a variety of reasons as a fan, but I've really enjoyed being able to work so hard with this universe and develop it outward. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I
Thank you.
love the partnership dynamic. I think it's fantastic. And I think touching on what you were saying about the agonizing process of relinquishing that control to the people who actually consume the comic. At the same time, if we re-angled it, if you were under a major comic book producer, the top-down editorial process could have been just as brutal, except you wouldn't have necessarily had the confidence that it was what the people would actually want. So
Correct.
in that sense, as painful as it might be, it could have been worse.
Yes, it could have. Yes.
Perspectives, right?
Yes. You may have had even less choices than two.
So then what are some of the outstanding challenges that you guys are taking head on at this point in time?
You know, I think the biggest challenge we face is getting people to understand that this is such a different paradigm than what their digital experiences have been thus far, that this really is something that people want and that they deserve. That they deserve a better digital experience, this better opportunity to have a collection that you have agency over. It's you know, it is something that just makes such total sense to me. But as I started, I was, I think, as resistant to it as some people may be. I think that you have to really open yourself up to it, and it's really exciting to me to. I'm a collector, right? And Rachel, you're the same way, right?
Oh yeah.
We both, will go on our editorial meeting, and it'll go a half hour over, and we're just like digging through comic boxes and showing each other like, oh, do you have this Neil Adams thing, or do you have this Wally Wood collection from England, and it'll just go on endlessly like that until one of us is like, oh wait, we're supposed to be in that other meeting, supposed to be in that budget meeting right now. Let's go.
So one challenge is that you're both too passionate about
A little bit. A little bit.
And what about you, Rachel, on the editorial side? What are the primary challenges that you're trying to tackle as this space grows?
A big thing for me is, comics have not historically been particularly diverse or inclusive, and I want to be an agent of change in that regard. And since NFTs can still be a divisive topic, sometimes it is hard to convince people to come and work for me, even though I want to give them money, because they're a little afraid of the backlash. I've had more than one person say, I want to work with you. I just don't want people dogpiling on me about this. So I'm so grateful to the people who've already taken that chance, and I see them as leaders to change that conversation. And the more their peers go, well, they keep doing it, and they seem to be very happy with the work. And hey, these characters are actually pretty interesting, because every single person, once they look at the characters, they go, oh wow, this guy's so cool. I can't wait to write him. Like, I've never heard anybody say, no, I don't have any interest in that guy. They love all the characters. So just so you know.
The most sort of negative thing is like, well, this didn't really speak to me, except for this group right here.
Right.
And that's like, great.
Yeah.
Whole story with them.
I think it's also about conveying that everything you love about comic books and everything you love about trading card games still exist, but albeit in a slightly different way, and they can still be enjoyed and consumed in a different way, and you can also just participate only to the extent that you are comfortable with. But Rachel, something you touched upon, which I think is critically important, because I think it's a conversation that's often underserved in not just blockchain overall, but I'm sure within the comic and editorial world, is this notion of diversity. And so how else are you trying to encourage diversity in this space?
Well, when we sat down and looked at all the characters that Brian had created, we said, hey, we have all these great characters. Is there any fine-tuning we can do to have it be a diverse and inclusive world right from the get-go? Because legacy comics companies, they will try and introduce that, and they get a lot of fan pushback. Either, you turn Superman's son gay, which is something going on right now that people are excited about or mad about. And sometimes they'll say, well, why don't you just make a new character and have them be like that? And because they never read the new characters, that's why. But here we had the chance to build up from the ground up. So in both creative talent and creative concept, that's how you build a more diverse and inclusive environment.
I think that's fantastic because I think, again, it's something that people take for granted or assume will happen naturally
Right.
without actually understanding the implicit challenges that it bears.
Right. So I think you do have to take deliberate, thoughtful action to make that happen.
So we've spoken about what's coming out and a potential spoiler, which is actually a direct spoiler, which is a major character dying.
Didn't say who.
We did not say who. But what else is in the pipeline?
Well, this seems like a good time to announce it. We currently have 3 series up and running, and we are going to be introducing 2 more this spring and summer.
Amazing.
As we mentioned, one is The Abyss, who has proven to be the fan favorite, spinning out of our anthology, Emergence Presents. The other is going to be sort of a teen street gang, kind of, they're at-risk youth who have kind of fallen through the cracks in this city, and they're going to be known as the Rejects, and I'm very excited about them.
Yeah, I'm super excited about both titles, about the talent we have on both titles. John Rosam, who's someone who I think has done some of my favorite comics. Like, you think about like perfect first issues of comics, and I think his very first issue of Zombie for Milestone Media was about as good as a comic book has ever gotten. Mm-hmm. And to have him years later working with us and really taking ownership over this Abyss character and building out the world and telling the story with Cliff Richards, who's been just really someone I didn't know coming into this.
Criminally underrated talent.
Yeah, just unbelievable artist. If you're here, by the way, please go scan the QR code, get that comic. Check out some of these cool villains he's already created. I mean, we actually have a legitimate rogues gallery.
Yes.
For the Abyss already.
This was going to be my next question, which was, can you explain what exactly InterPop is doing at South by Southwest? What are you offering to the people who are participating?
So the event team came to me and they said, what do you want to do at South by Southwest? And I said, this right now is my favorite job of all time, right? Running InterPop, favorite job. Close second, running a comic book store. And so I said, please create for me a physical digital comic book store. And so we have a space here, and you can come in, and we will, we have some gumballs there for you, and we have shelves. I got to reorganize shelves, Marissa. Do you know how long it's been since I reorganized a comic book shelf? It was glorious. I loved it. And we have, comic covers on foam core with QR codes on them that'll take you to the landing page to buy any of the comics we have for sale. We also have the 9 number 0, still available for free. And we have the Abyss number 0.
Yeah. The 9 number 0 is what first launched in July. It kicked off this entire universe. And it's one of our free to reads for all time. And then the Abyss 0 collects his first 3 short stories from the Emergence Presents series under a new comic cover by the artist Juan Doe. And
who's an NFT artist
yes.
of some renown on
yes.
his own.
Yes. And you can just go scan that QR code. It will automatically take you to the landing page. You just can log into your Kukai wallet because that will automatically be created now. And you'll have a comic that you can read and a vote at the end of it.
There's 3 stories. Each has a specific villain at the center of that story, and you get to choose. You get to have a say. You get to vote on who you would like to come back for the Abyss number 1. John Rosam is literally right now anxiously awaiting the result of that vote so he can finish the script for number 1.
Yep.
So essentially anyone who's coming through this space, if you weren't a comic book fan before, you can start now with a simple scan of a QR code. And I love the idea of conveying a blockchain-based comic through the nostalgia of a traditional comic book store, especially with the gumball machine. I did witness that earlier. And I
really tried to get them to get me an arcade machine, but I think I blew the budget on a number of other things there. So
And I have to say, our booth looks dope. It's amazing. So great concept.
Yeah, so unfortunate for those who are tuning in virtually, but to everyone else who's around South by Southwest, it's going to be a matter of time before they check it out. And then
Yeah,
start
I think we're
reading.
going to be bringing the show on the road, this comic book shop. So I think you might see it coming to a comic convention.
Well, it's
near you.
fantastic. Expose it to everybody.
Yeah. It's just so great to see all those covers done by all the artists that have been working with, because we have our regular releases, and then we'll have special variant editions at, in smaller quantities, higher price. And just seeing the shelves full of all this amazing art is truly heartwarming.
Yeah, Rachel and I, it's been about a year, a little more than a year since we started working on this. And we both this morning were just like,
We did it.
yeah, we did this. This is awesome. It looks so good. And to see, I think we have 33 different covers on display in the store right now that are all, available for sale. But, and it's just kind of a fraction of the content we've put out this year. So it's just kind of amazing.
It's just a physical manifestation of all of your efforts so far, with so much left to keep going.
It really does feel like a big landmark for us, milestone. One of those.
So with that, do you just have a massive exhale of being like, yes, we did do it. Here we are.
I actually have tremendous anxiety because I'm like, we still have so much stuff to do. We have 2 more titles we're going to add to this. We have, we're going to add, we're going to expand the line. We're going to do that licensed comic. We're going to do that creator-owned book. Oh, yeah, and we're going to add, So a lot of anxiety, but excitement too.
But I mean, at the same point, if you're taking pause and standing on a road and looking at how far further you have to go, you take a moment to just look behind you and realize how far you've come.
Oh, of course. We need that,
A year ago, we didn't even have a concept for the 0 issue, and now what we
Look
have
at it.
over there. It's incredible. It really is.
Well, listen, thank you both so much for sharing the story of InterPop and sharing your own personal stories, as well as this amazing partnership, because you guys are producing incredible work at such a pace as well. So, yeah, thank you so much. It was an honor.
Thank you, Marissa.